You are not wrong for wanting money. You are wrong if money becomes the god you kneel to. Listen carefully. Poverty does not automatically make a man noble. Wealth does not automatically make a man corrupt. But both poverty and wealth will test the soul. Poverty will test whether you can suffer without becoming bitter. Wealth will test whether you can rise without becoming cruel. And many people fail both tests. They are poor and they become resentful. They become rich and they become empty. They spend their youth begging for money, then spend their success trying to prove they are better than the people who once looked down on them. That is not freedom. That is just a new form of slavery wearing expensive clothes. This is why this teaching is called Stoicism. Get rich without losing your soul. Because you were not born to worship poverty, and you were not born to worship wealth. You were born to live with reason, to build with discipline, to rise with dignity, to desire a better life without selling the highest part of yourself to obtain it. Maybe you know this pain. You were not born into luxury. No rich family name, no powerful uncle, no hidden inheritance, no one waiting to rescue you when life became heavy. You grew up ordinary, maybe too ordinary for the world to notice. You learned early that money changes the way people listen. When someone rich speaks, people lean in. When someone poor speaks, people interrupt. When someone has status, their silence looks mysterious. When someone has nothing, their silence looks weak. You saw it. In school, at work, in family gatherings, in relationships, in the small humiliations that no one records, but the soul remembers. Maybe you remember asking for something simple and being told, "We cannot afford it." Maybe you remember watching others walk through life with confidence because money had already opened doors for them before they arrived. Maybe you remember being laughed at when you said you wanted more, not because your dream was evil, but because people thought someone like you should not dream so loudly. And there, in that quiet wound, ambition was born. Not the clean kind at first, the painful kind, the kind that says, "One day they will see. One day I will have enough. One day, no one will speak to me like that again. One day I will never feel small in front of money again." And I tell you this with severity. That fire can save you, or it can destroy you. Ambition is a powerful servant, but a terrible master. If ambition is ruled by virtue, it becomes discipline, service, courage, and creation. But if ambition is ruled by humiliation, it becomes revenge. It becomes greed. It becomes the hunger to be seen by the very people whose judgment should no longer matter. This is where the Stoic path becomes different. The early Stoics taught that a human being must live according to logos, reason, nature, order. The highest part of you must govern the lower parts. Not comfort, not fear, not hunger, not envy, not the wound that wants applause. The Middle Stoics brought this wisdom into society, duty, work, money, family, and public life. They understood that a person does not become virtuous by escaping the world. A person becomes virtuous by walking through the world without being owned by it. And the later Stoics, Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, made the truth painfully practical. They knew that wealth can be used well, and poverty can be endured well. But neither one is the highest good. The highest good is virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. Money is not evil, but money is not sacred. Money is a tool, a preferred indifferent, something useful when held by a disciplined soul, something dangerous when held by a starving ego. So this video is not here to tell you to stay poor. That would be foolish. If you can build, build. If you can earn, earn. If you can lift your family, lift them. If you can give yourself more freedom, more safety, more choice, more ability to serve, then do it. Do not let lazy people romanticize your struggle. Do not let bitter people make you ashamed of wanting more. Do not let false spirituality convince you that poverty is automatically purity. But also do not let the marketplace convince you that your soul is a fair price for success. Because some people do not get rich. They get purchased. They trade honesty for access. They trade sleep for status. They trade loyalty for opportunity. They trade compassion for dominance. They trade their word for money. They trade their peace for comparison. And one day, they stand in a beautiful house with a dead inner life and call it winning. No, that is not winning. That is losing yourself with better furniture. I want you to imagine a young man. He is not special in the way the world understands special. No spotlight, no privilege, no applause. He grows up in a modest place, among ordinary people with ordinary worries. Bills, food, rent, expectations, the quiet pressure to survive instead of become. But something in him refuses to accept that survival is the whole story. From a young age, he watches people chase money like frightened animals. He watches some lie for it, some betray for it, some bow for it, some sell their laughter, their time, their dignity, their health, their families, their truth, and he thinks there must be another way, not an easy way, but a clean way, a way to rise without rotting, a way to become capable without becoming cruel, a way to earn without making money the ruler of his heart. So he begins, slowly, quietly, while others laugh, while others call him naive, while others say, "You cannot be honest and win," while others tell him that the world belongs to the ruthless. He does not argue. He studies. He works. He learns skills. He saves small amounts. He refuses cheap pleasure. He refuses dirty shortcuts. He refuses to let poverty become an excuse for ugliness. He refuses to let ambition become permission to betray himself. And the road is lonely, because when you choose the clean path in a dirty race, many people will call you weak. They will call your restraint fear. They will call your honesty stupidity. They will call your patience failure. They will laugh because they cannot understand a man who wants money, but will not kneel to it. But the Stoic does not live by the crowd's interpretation. He lives by the court inside his own chest. He asks one question: can I respect the person I am becoming? Not, did they clap? Not, did they envy me? Not, did I look successful? Can I respect the person I am becoming? That is the standard. And in this teaching, we will walk through the full journey. First, we will see how an ordinary beginning can still carry an extraordinary soul. Then we will examine poverty, not as shame, but as a test. We will face the laughter of society and the pressure to sell your virtue just to move faster. We will learn how ambition can become fire, but virtue must remain law. We will enter the loneliness that comes when you refuse to become like those who hurt you. We will see how a person builds in silence while louder people chase applause. Then we will face the true twist. When money finally comes, because money does not end the test, money begins a new one. And you will learn that the Stoic victory is not simply wealth, it is freedom. The freedom to use money without being used by it. The freedom to rise without despising where you came from. The freedom to become wealthy without becoming hollow. So, stay with me. Not for motivation, not for fantasy, not for the childish dream of proving everyone wrong. Stay for something harder. Stay to learn how to want more without becoming less. Because the world will test you with poverty. Then it will test you with money. And if you do not know who you are before both arrive, both will own you. The first lesson begins where every life begins. Not with wealth, not with status, not with applause, but with an ordinary child who carried an uncommon refusal. He was born ordinary, but his soul refused to stay poor. He was born ordinary, but his soul refused to stay poor. He was born into nothing the world would call remarkable. No inheritance, no powerful name, no family reputation that opened doors before he arrived. No room full of people waiting to applaud his potential. Just an ordinary child in an ordinary place, surrounded by ordinary fears. Bills, food, rent, work, survival. The kind of life where people do not ask, "What is your destiny?" They ask, Can you make enough to get through the month? And yet, something inside him refused to bow to the smallness around him. Not because he thought he was better than others, not because he hated where he came from, but because even as a boy, he felt that a human being was not born only to eat, sleep, work, worry, and die tired. He did not have the words for it yet. He did not know the name Logos. He did not know the early Stoics taught that life must be lived according to reason and nature. But deep inside, he sensed it. There is an order to a good life. There is a higher way to stand. There is something in a man that must not be sold, even when he has very little. That was the beginning of his Stoic soul. Not wealth, not success, not praise. A quiet refusal. A refusal to believe that poverty could define the height of his spirit. The world around him had its own religion. Money. People bowed to it without calling it worship. They changed their voice around those who had it. They lowered their eyes around those who had more. They laughed differently near rich people. They listened more carefully to those who arrived in expensive clothes. And the boy saw it. He saw that money could make a foolish man sound wise. He saw that money could make a cruel man seem important. He saw that money could make people forgive arrogance, excuse dishonesty, and admire emptiness. But he also saw the other side. He saw poor people treated as if their thoughts were smaller. He saw honest people ignored because they had no status. He saw tired parents working hard, but still being spoken to like they had failed at life. And something in him began to burn. Not hatred, not yet. A question. Is this all a human life is worth? The early Stoics would have answered him with severity. No, a man's worth is not measured by what fortune placed in his hands. It is measured by the quality of his judgment, his actions, his courage, his justice, his self-control. Wealth may be useful, poverty may be painful, but neither one touches the highest good unless the soul allows it. This is difficult for the modern mind to accept, because the modern world does not ask whether you are virtuous. It asks what you own. It asks what you earn. It asks what you display. It asks whether other people envy your life. But Stoicism asks a harder question. Can you remain honorable while wanting more? That question would follow him for years. As he grew older, he began to understand the pressure of being ordinary. There is a quiet violence in being underestimated every day. Not the violence of fists, the violence of low expectations. People do not always insult you directly. Sometimes they simply assume you will not go far. They speak to you in a tone that says, know your place. They smile when you talk about ambition. They call your dream unrealistic before they have even listened. They tell you to be practical, when what they really mean is, do not rise high enough to make us uncomfortable. The young man heard these things often. From friends, from relatives, from people who had already made peace with their own surrender. They told him life was just like this. Work, pay bills, stay out of trouble. Do not dream too loudly. Do not expect too much. Do not become disappointed. But he could not accept that. He did not want to become rich just to impress them, at least not in his cleanest moments. He wanted to become capable. He wanted to become disciplined. He wanted to build a life where his family did not have to bow to emergencies. He wanted enough money to breathe, to choose, to protect, to serve. But more than that, he wanted to know if a man could rise without becoming dirty. That was the real question. Not can I become rich, but can I become rich and still recognize myself? Because even then, he had seen what ambition does to weak souls. A poor man says, I only want enough. Then he gets enough and wants superiority. He says, I only want respect. Then he gets respect and wants worship. He says, I will never become like those who humiliated me. Then money comes, and he becomes the same kind of person with better shoes. The boy did not want that. Something in him feared that kind of success more than failure, because failure would hurt, but corruption would deform him. This is where the Stoic path begins to separate itself from ordinary ambition. Ordinary ambition asks, how do I get more? Stoic ambition asks, what must I refuse while I am getting more? Refuse dishonesty, refuse envy, refuse self-pity, refuse the belief that poverty gives you permission to become cruel, refuse the belief that wealth gives you permission to become proud, refuse the world's attempt to make money the final judge of your value. The young man had no empire, but he had a standard, and a standard is often the first property of the soul. Before money, before status, before power, before opportunity, a man must own a standard. Without it, every offer becomes tempting. Every shortcut becomes reasonable. Every betrayal becomes negotiable. Every compromise calls itself survival. But with a standard, even a poor man carries something no market can price. He carries an inner law, and this law whispered to him in his ordinary life. Do not hate money, but do not worship it. Do not romanticize poverty, but do not let poverty make you ashamed of your soul. Do not despise the rich, but do not admire wealth without examining the person who holds it. Do not become bitter because you started with less. Begin anyway. Build anyway. Stand anyway. That was his first wealth. Not coin, not property, not recognition. The first wealth was the refusal to let circumstances write his character. Here is the lesson. You do not choose the house you are born into. You do not choose the money your family had. You do not choose the first opinion people form when they see your clothes, your neighborhood, your accent, or your lack of status. But you choose the law you live under. You choose whether poverty becomes your excuse or your training. You choose whether ambition becomes revenge or responsibility. You choose whether the soul remains poor even after the pockets become full. He was born ordinary, but his soul refused to stay poor. And once that refusal awakened, the second trial came quickly, because poverty itself did not shame him. People tried to. Poverty did not shame him, but people tried to. Poverty did not insult him first. People did. The empty wallet was painful, yes. The old clothes were painful. The cheap meals, the careful spending, the quiet fear when bills arrived. All of it was painful, but none of that wounded him as deeply as the way people looked at him because of it. That is the second trial, not poverty itself. The shame others try to attach to poverty. He learned early that the world speaks differently to those who have little. A rich man can be quiet, and people call him mysterious. A poor man can be quiet, and people call him weak. A rich man can dream, and people call him visionary. A poor man can dream, and people call him unrealistic. A rich man can fail, and people call it experience. A poor man can fail, and people call it proof that he should have stayed in his place. This is not easy to carry. It makes a young man question himself before he has even begun. He walks into rooms already feeling measured. He speaks, and he wonders if his words sound smaller because his background is small. He works harder than others, but still feels the need to prove that he deserves to be there. This is the invisible weight of poverty, not only the lack of money, the constant pressure to justify your existence. The Stoics would not deny this. Stoicism is not blindness. It does not say the world is fair when it is not. It does not tell a hungry man that hunger is imaginary. It does not tell a poor man that disrespect does not hurt. But Stoicism asks a higher question. Will you let the world's judgment become your own? The early Stoics taught that external things are not the highest good. Money, status, reputation, comfort, and recognition may be preferred. They may be useful. They may make life easier, but they do not define the worth of the soul. The Middle Stoics carried this into society. They understood that a person must live among people who misjudge, compare, rank, and dismiss. And the later Stoics made it practical. Epictetus, once enslaved, knew that a person can be looked down upon by the world and still remain inwardly free. Seneca, though wealthy, warned that many rich men are poor in spirit because they are owned by what they possess. Marcus Aurelius, though emperor, kept reminding himself that praise and contempt are both unstable winds. So the young man began to understand. If he allowed their laughter to define him, he would become their creation. If he allowed their contempt to poison him, he would become bitter before he became strong. If he allowed poverty to become shame, he would carry the prison inside himself even after he escaped it. One afternoon, he sat at a table with people who spoke about money as if it were the only proof of intelligence. They laughed about those who could not afford certain things. They mocked people who worked simple jobs. They spoke as if poverty were always the result of laziness, as if life gave everyone the same beginning. He said little, not because he had no thoughts, but because he was studying. He saw something clearly that day. Some people do not hate poverty because it causes suffering. They hate poverty because it reminds them how much of their identity depends on feeling above someone else. And in that moment, he made a quiet vow. I will escape poverty, but I will not become one of them. That vow mattered, because pain has two roads. One road turns pain into resentment. The other turns pain into discipline. The first road says, I was humiliated, so I will humiliate others when I rise. The second road says, I was humiliated, so I will never use success as permission to make another soul feel small. That is the Stoic road. Not soft, not passive, not weak. It is harder than revenge, because revenge is easy to understand. Dignity requires more strength. Here is the harsh truth. Poverty may limit what you can buy, but shame can limit what you believe you are allowed to become. And if you accept that shame, you will begin to shrink yourself before life even touches you. Do not do that. Let poverty teach you discipline. Let lack teach you resourcefulness. Let being underestimated teach you patience. Let being ignored teach you to build without applause. But do not let poverty teach you self-hatred. Do not let the arrogance of others become the voice inside your own mind. The young man did not have much, but he began to protect one thing fiercely: his interpretation. They could call him poor. They could call him unrealistic. They could call him naive. They could laugh at the size of his beginning, but they could not decide the size of his soul. That belonged to him. Here is the lesson. Poverty does not make you less worthy, but it will reveal whether you are strong enough to keep your worth when the world refuses to see it. Do not let lack become shame. Do not let shame become bitterness. Do not let bitterness become your character, because the next trial is even sharper. When the world realizes you will not be bought cheaply, it will mock you for refusing to sell your virtue. The world mocked him because he would not sell his virtue. The world does not only tempt you with money, sometimes it tempts you with mockery. It laughs at your honesty until you begin to wonder if corruption is simply another name for intelligence. That was the third trial. The young man wanted to rise. He wanted money. He wanted freedom. He wanted to stop living under the pressure of every bill, every emergency, every small humiliation that poverty places on the back. But he did not want to become dirty to get there. And that confused people. They could understand ambition. They could understand hunger. They could understand wanting more. But they could not understand wanting more with limits. He would not lie to get ahead. He would not flatter people he did not respect just to gain access. He would not betray a friend for an opportunity. He would not take from someone weaker and call it strategy. He would not sell his word for a faster road. So they called him naive. They said, "This is why you will stay poor." They said, "Good people get used." They said, "The world is not fair, so stop acting like fairness matters." They said, "If you do not play dirty, dirty people will beat you." And there was a time when those words entered him, not because he believed them fully, but because pain makes temptation sound wise. When you are tired, corruption can look practical. When you are broke, dishonesty can look like opportunity. When you are humiliated, revenge can look like justice. This is where Stoicism becomes severe. Virtue is easy to praise when it costs nothing. Honesty is easy when lying gives you no advantage. Justice is easy when injustice would not profit you. Temperance is easy when desire is asleep. But when life offers you a shortcut and asks for a piece of your soul in exchange, that is where your philosophy stands trial. The early Stoics taught that virtue is the only true good. Not money, not status, not reputation, not comfort. These things may be useful, but they are not sacred. The sacred thing is the quality of the soul that uses them. The Middle Stoics brought this into public life. They knew society is full of compromise, pressure, ambition, politics, and deals made in shadows. But a person must still ask, what kind of human being am I becoming through the way I pursue success? The later Stoics lived this question personally. Epictetus had little, but taught inner freedom. Seneca had much, but warned against being possessed by wealth. Marcus Aurelius had power, but kept reminding himself not to become poisoned by it. The lesson is clear. Stoicism is not ignorance of the world's darkness. It is the refusal to become darkness just because darkness exists. One day, the young man was offered an easy advantage. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would look evil from the outside. Just a small lie, a small betrayal, a small silence when truth was needed, a small agreement with something he knew was wrong. Everyone around him treated it like normal business. They said, "Do not be dramatic." They said, "This is how things work." They said, "You are thinking too much." But he felt the weight of it. He understood that character is rarely sold all at once. It is sold in small pieces, one excuse at a time, one compromise at a time. One moment where you say, just this once, and then just this once becomes the kind of person you are. So he refused, and he paid for it. He lost access. He lost approval. He lost the warm smile of people who liked him better when he was easy to bend. And for a while, it looked like he had lost the game, but he had kept something more important. He had kept command of himself. Here is the harsh truth. If the price of success is your integrity, then you are not buying freedom. You are purchasing a more expensive prison. The world may mock you for refusing to sell your virtue. Let it. The crowd has always laughed at what it cannot understand. They laughed because they thought his restraint was weakness. But restraint is not weakness when temptation is real. Restraint is strength under law. So he continued, poorer than some, slower than some, less celebrated than some, but cleaner. And clean ambition has a different power. It does not rot you while you rise. Here is the lesson. A person with virtue is not someone who never sees the shortcut. It is someone who sees it clearly and still refuses to betray himself. The world may call that foolish, but Stoicism calls it freedom, because now the fire of ambition had awakened in him fully. And the next question became unavoidable. Can ambition burn brightly without becoming the law of the soul? Ambition became his fire, but virtue became his law. Ambition is not evil, but ambition without virtue becomes a beautiful disease. That was the fourth trial. The young man had already learned that poverty could wound him. He had learned that people could mock him. He had learned that the world would offer shortcuts and call them wisdom. But now he had to face something more dangerous, his own hunger. Because after enough years of being underestimated, ambition no longer feels like a dream. It feels like survival. It feels like dignity. It feels like oxygen. He wanted to earn more. He wanted to become capable. He wanted to walk into places without feeling invisible. He wanted to stop calculating every meal, every bill, every unexpected cost. He wanted to give his family a life where fear did not sit at the table every month. There was nothing wrong with that. Stoicism does not ask a man to stay poor so he can pretend to be pure. That is pride in another form. Money can be useful. Money can protect. Money can create choices. Money can help a man serve his family, support good people, build meaningful work, and reduce unnecessary suffering. The Stoics understood this. They called money a preferred indifferent. Preferred because it is better to have resources than to lack them. Indifferent because money itself does not make the soul good or bad. The hand that holds it decides. The early Stoics taught that virtue is the only true good. Wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, everything else must remain beneath it. The Middle Stoics carried this into ordinary life. They understood that a person must work, trade, build, provide, and live among society without becoming owned by society's rewards. The later Stoics sharpened the warning. Seneca had wealth, but knew wealth could chain a man if he mistook comfort for freedom. Epictetus had little, but knew poverty could not enslave the mind unless the mind surrendered. Marcus Aurelius had an empire, but still wrote to himself as a man trying not to be corrupted by power. So the young man made a law for himself. I may pursue money, but money will not define my soul. I may build success, but success will not become my God. I may desire a better life, but I will not become worse to obtain it. That law saved him many times. When envy rose, the law answered. When comparison burned, the law answered. When someone richer looked down on him, the law answered. When the temptation came to cut corners, exaggerate, manipulate, or betray, the law answered. Not because he had no desire, but because desire had a master. This is the difference between ordinary ambition and Stoic ambition. Ordinary ambition asks, how can I win? Stoic ambition asks, what must remain intact while I win? Ordinary ambition wants applause. Stoic ambition wants alignment. Ordinary ambition is terrified of being poor. Stoic ambition is more terrified of becoming hollow. There were days when he almost forgot this. Days when he saw people passing him. People with less discipline but more confidence. People with less honesty but faster results. People who bragged, lied, manipulated, and still seemed to rise. On those days, the old wound whispered. Maybe they were right. Maybe clean people finish last. Maybe virtue is too expensive for a poor man. But then he asked himself one question. If I become rich by becoming someone I despise, who exactly became rich? That question cut through the fever, because wealth that costs the soul does not make you larger. It makes the bank account grow, while the human being shrinks. And he refused that trade. So he kept building. Not perfectly, not without anger, not without temptation, but with a law above his hunger. He studied skills. He worked extra hours. He learned how money moved. He learned how people created value. He learned to save, invest, negotiate, speak clearly, and endure slow progress. He did not confuse spirituality with laziness. He did not confuse humility with weakness. He did not confuse patience with passivity. He acted, but he acted under discipline. Here is the lesson. Ambition is fire. It can warm your home, or it can burn your soul down. Virtue must be the law that tells the fire where to go. Want more, build more, earn more, but never let the hunger to rise become permission to rot. Because once a person chooses virtue over dirty speed, a new price appears. Loneliness, the price of not becoming like them. Loneliness was the price of not becoming like them. Loneliness is not always a curse. Sometimes it is the first proof that your soul has stopped bargaining with the crowd. That was the fifth trial. The young man had chosen ambition, but he had also chosen a law above ambition. He would build, he would earn, he would rise, but he would not become false to move faster. And that choice began to separate him from people. Not all at once, quietly. A conversation ended sooner. An invitation stopped coming. A joke was made at his expense. Someone called him too serious. Someone called him proud. Someone said he had changed. But the truth was more painful. He had not changed into something worse. He had simply stopped pretending to be small enough to make others comfortable. This is where many people return to the old life. Not because the old life was better, but because it was less lonely. The crowd may be unhealthy, but it is warm. Weak habits may destroy you, but they give you company. A low standard may keep you poor, but at least you are not standing alone with your discipline. The Stoic must understand this. When you choose virtue, you may lose people who only knew how to love the version of you that was easy to control. When you choose discipline, you may lose people who preferred you distracted. When you choose clean ambition, You may lose people who wanted you either poor and harmless or rich and corrupt like them. The early Stoics taught that a person must live according to nature and reason. But nature does not always mean comfort. Sometimes living according to nature means separating from what weakens the highest part of you. The Middle Stoics understood society and duty. They did not teach hatred of people. They did not teach arrogant isolation. But they knew that no person can serve others well if he first sells his soul to belong. And the later Stoics made it practical. Epictetus would remind you that another person's approval is not yours to control. Marcus Aurelius would remind you to work with people, but not to become ruled by their ignorance. Seneca would warn that the crowd often praises what destroys the soul and mocks what saves it. So the young man learned to walk alone, not with bitterness, not with superiority, not with the childish thought that everyone else was beneath him. He walked alone because his standard had become too expensive to trade for cheap belonging. There were nights when this hurt. He would come home tired. He would see others laughing, spending, performing success, chasing pleasure, acting as if life were nothing but noise. And for a moment, he would wonder if he was wasting his youth. Maybe he was too strict. Maybe he was missing out. Maybe the clean path was just another name for slow failure. But then he would remember the faces of people who had sold themselves piece by piece. They had more attention, more stories, more applause, but their eyes were restless. Their laughter was loud, but not free. Their money moved, but their character did not stand. And he understood. Not every full table feeds the soul. Not every crowd is company. Not every lonely road is punishment. Sometimes loneliness is the space where a man finally hears his own law clearly. This is the harsh truth. If you need everyone to understand your path before you walk it, you will never leave the place that shaped your weakness. The young man did not hate those who mocked him. He did not need revenge. He did not need to explain himself to every person who misunderstood his restraint. He simply returned to the work. He read when others wasted hours. He trained when others laughed. He saved when others spent to be seen. He stayed quiet when others confused noise with power. And slowly, loneliness changed. At first, it felt like rejection. Then, it became protection. It protected his focus. It protected his discipline. It protected him from people who would have gladly traded his future for their comfort. That is a painful gift, but it is a gift. Here is the lesson. Cô độc không luôn là dấu hiệu bạn sai. Sometimes it is the price of refusing to become someone your soul would not respect. Do not worship loneliness. Do not become cold. Do not despise people. But do not sell your standard just to sit at a table where your virtue must be left outside. He paid the price. He walked alone. And because he stopped begging to be understood, he finally had enough silence to build. That is where the sixth trial begins. He built in silence while the loud ones chased applause. He built in silence while the loud ones chased applause. Silence is not empty. For the disciplined man, silence is where the future is built. That was the sixth trial. The young man had already paid the price of loneliness. Now he had to learn what to do with it. Many people become lonely and turn bitter. They spend their isolation complaining, comparing, accusing the world, and replaying every insult in their mind. But the Stoic does something different. He turns solitude into training. He turns rejection into focus. He turns being ignored into the privacy required to become dangerous in the right way. Not dangerous to people, dangerous to the weakness inside himself. The world around him was loud. People posted more than they practiced. They announced more than they built. They wanted applause before achievement. They wanted recognition before mastery. They wanted to look successful before becoming useful. And sometimes, the young man felt the pull of it. He wanted to show them. He wanted to prove he was not small. He wanted to post the work before the work was ready. He wanted someone to say, "I see you. I believe in you. You were right all along." But then Stoicism corrected him. The early Stoics taught that a person must live according to logos, order, reason, nature. And nature does not rush just because people are watching. The seed does not scream while becoming a tree. The river does not ask for applause while carving stone. The disciplined soul does not need noise to prove that growth is happening. The Middle Stoics understood duty. They knew that real work often happens without witnesses. You do the task because it is yours. You improve because improvement is right. You serve the future before the future can reward you. And the later Stoics made it personal. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, not to impress an audience, but to govern his own soul. Epictetus taught discipline without needing status. Seneca warned that public praise can become another chain if a man needs it to continue. So the young man learned to build quietly. He woke early. He studied before work. He stayed after work. He learned skills no one in his circle cared about. He watched how money moved. He learned how value was created. He learned how people negotiated. He learned how to speak with clarity. He learned how to save without becoming cheap. He learned how to spend without becoming careless. He learned that $1 wasted to impress others is often a confession of inner poverty. There were nights when he was tired. His hands hurt. His eyes burned. His mind wanted escape. He would see others laughing, spending, chasing fast pleasure, living loudly, and a voice inside him would say, "Why are you doing this?" No one says. No one claps. No one knows how much you are trying. But then another voice, quieter and stronger, would answer, "Ise, my future sees. Virtue sees." That was enough, because one of the first signs of maturity is the ability to work without immediate validation. A child needs constant praise. A weak man needs constant proof. But a stoic man can continue in silence because his standard is not rented from the crowd. This does not mean he never shares. It does not mean he hides from the world. It means he does not let applause become the fuel of his discipline. Because applause is unstable. Some days they praise you. Some days they ignore you. Some days they misunderstand you. Some days they laugh. If your discipline depends on their reaction, then they own the switch. He could not allow that. So he practiced the harder path. Do the work first. Let the evidence speak later. Save before displaying. Learn before declaring. Improve before demanding respect. Build the foundation before decorating the house. That discipline began to change him. Not quickly, not dramatically, but deeply. His posture changed. His speech changed. His spending changed. His patience changed. He no longer needed to answer every insult. He no longer needed to explain every move. He no longer needed to convince small-minded people that his path was real. He was too busy becoming the proof. This is the harsh truth. If you need the world to clap before you can continue, you are not building a life. You are performing one. The young man stopped performing. He built, quietly, consistently, with sore hands, tired eyes, and a mind slowly becoming sharper than his circumstances. And over time, something happened. The same people who mocked his silence began to notice his results. The same people who called him naive began to ask how he changed. The same people who thought he was doing nothing realized he had been building while they were watching themselves talk. But by then, he no longer needed their approval. That was the victory. Not that they finally saw him, but that he had become strong without needing to be seen. Here is the lesson. The loudest people are not always building the most. Sometimes the most important work of your life will happen in silence, with no applause, no witness, and no immediate reward. Do it anyway, because a life built for applause collapses when applause disappears. But a life built on discipline can stand even in silence. He built quietly while others chased attention. And then came the moment most people think is the end of the story. Money began to come, but in Stoicism, that was not the end. That was the real test. When money came, the real test began. Money did not end his trial. Money revealed whether the trial had truly changed him. That was the seventh test. For years, he thought poverty was the hardest enemy. The pressure, the humiliation, The careful spending, the feeling of being invisible in rooms where money spoke louder than character. He thought if he could finally earn enough, breathe easier, provide more, and no longer fear every emergency, then the soul would finally rest. But the Stoics knew better. Poverty tests your endurance. Money tests your character. And sometimes the second test is more dangerous, because suffering is obvious. Temptation is not. When money began to come, it did not arrive like thunder. It came slowly. A better opportunity, a skill finally paying off, a client who trusted him, a project that worked, a month where he did not feel crushed, then another, then another. For the first time, he could buy things without panic. He could help his family without destroying himself. He could walk into places where he once felt small and no longer feel like he had to apologize for existing. That felt good, and it was not wrong. The Stoic does not despise comfort just to appear holy. Comfort can be received with gratitude. Money can be used with wisdom. Success can become a tool for responsibility. But then came the hidden danger. The wound inside him wanted to spend money, not for need, not for joy, not for usefulness, but for revenge. It wanted to say, "Look at me now." It wanted to buy proof. It wanted to dress the old humiliation in expensive clothes. It wanted to make the people who once laughed feel small. And that is where he saw the real enemy. Not poverty, not society, not the people who mocked him. The wounded part of himself that wanted to use success as a weapon. The early Stoics would say this is where the soul must return to logos. Reason must ask what money is for. Is it for freedom, responsibility, service, stability, and meaningful creation? Or is it for vanity, revenge, domination, and the endless hunger to be admired? The Middle Stoics would remind him that a man does not rise alone. He has family, community, duty, and people who may one day need his strength. The later Stoics would warn him with sharper words. Seneca would say that wealth is not the problem, but slavery to wealth is. Epictetus would ask whether he owns his possessions, or whether his possessions now own him. Marcus Aurelius would remind him that praise from others is smoke, and that death will one day reduce every status symbol to silence. So the young man had to choose again. Not once, daily, when he wanted to show off, when he wanted to buy respect, when he wanted to answer old insults with new status, when he wanted to look down on people still struggling, when he wanted to become the kind of man he once hated. Money made those temptations louder. That is why wealth is not the end of philosophy. It is one of its greatest examinations. A poor man can claim he is humble because he has no option. A rich man must choose humility when arrogance is available. A powerless man can claim he is kind because he cannot punish. A powerful man must choose justice when revenge is possible. A struggling man can claim he does not care about luxury because he cannot afford it. A successful man must practice temperance when excess is within reach. That is the difference. Money gave him choices, and choices revealed him. One day, he stood in a store looking at something expensive. He could afford it. For years, he could not. A part of him wanted it, not because it was needed, but because it would prove something. He imagined people seeing it. He imagined the old faces changing. He imagined the respect that might come. Then he asked himself, am I buying this because it serves my life? Or because my wound still wants an audience? That question saved him. Sometimes, he still bought good things. There is nothing holy about pretending not to enjoy the fruit of honest work. But he learned to buy from freedom, not from hunger. To spend with wisdom, not insecurity. To enjoy without worshipping. To own without being owned. Here is the harsh truth. If money makes you need more attention, more praise, more superiority, and more proof, then you did not become rich. You became more expensive to control. The world now owns you through luxury instead of lack. The young man refused that. He used money to create stability, to protect his family, to buy time for meaningful work, to help where help was right, to reduce fear, not inflate ego, And slowly, he understood. Money was never the throne. It was only a tool placed before the throne. Virtue had to remain seated above it. Here is the lesson. Do not fear money. Fear the version of yourself that money may awaken if virtue is not stronger than your wound. Poverty tested whether he could suffer without becoming bitter. Money tested whether he could rise without becoming proud. And once money came, one final danger waited. Would he become rich just to look down on the poor? He did not become rich to look down on the poor. A man has not escaped poverty if he uses money to despise the poor. He has only changed the shape of his poverty. That was the 8th trial. The young man had begun to rise. He had more than before. More choices, more stability, more respect, more rooms where people listened when he spoke. And at first, it felt like justice. After years of being dismissed, it felt almost healing to no longer be invisible. But then came a quiet temptation. The temptation to forget. To forget the old bills, to forget the cheap meals, to forget the tired faces of people who worked hard and still had little, to forget the shame others tried to place on him when he had nothing, to forget what it felt like to be spoken to as if poverty were a personal failure. Money gives many people permission to become cruel, not because money creates cruelty from nothing, but because money gives old wounds a louder voice. A man who was once humiliated may begin to humiliate. A man who was once ignored may begin to ignore. A man who was once looked down upon may begin to look down on others, just to prove he is no longer one of them. This is one of the ugliest failures of the soul, to become the very thing that wounded you. The Stoics would not accept this. The early Stoics taught that all human beings share in reason. Logos is not only for the rich. Virtue is not only for those with comfort. The poor man, the worker, the servant, the emperor, the merchant, the soldier, all stand under the same moral law. The Middle Stoics carried this into society and duty. They understood that a person does not rise only for himself. He rises into responsibility. And the later Stoics made this truth impossible to escape. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but reminded himself that he was born to work with human beings, not to stand above them in contempt. Epictetus had been enslaved, yet became inwardly freer than many powerful men. Seneca had wealth, but warned again and again that possessions do not make a soul noble. So the young man had to ask himself, what is my success for? Is it only for comfort? Only for revenge? Only for display? Only to make others feel the smallness I once felt? Or is it for something higher? One day, he met a younger man who reminded him of himself. Quiet, uncertain, working hard, wearing ordinary clothes, careful with money, trying to speak with confidence, but carrying the familiar weight of being underestimated. The old version of him would have seen that pain instantly, but the new version of him had a choice. He could ignore him. He could judge him. He could enjoy the distance between them. He could say, I climbed out, so why can't he? Or he could remember. He could remember that people do not all begin with the same tools. He could remember that being poor does not mean being lazy. He could remember that behind every ordinary face, there may be a soul fighting battles no one sees. So he did what he wished someone had done for him. He listened, not with pity, with respect. He gave advice without arrogance. He offered help without making the younger man feel owned. He spoke to him like someone who still had a future. And in that moment, he understood something wealth alone could never teach. The true measure of rising is how you treat those who are still climbing. This is where Sympatheia enters. The Stoic understanding that human beings are connected. You are not separate from the struggling person just because your bank account changed. You are not superior because fortune has shifted. You are not more human because money has finally stood beside you. The person still suffering is not a reminder of what you escaped. He is a reminder of what you must not betray. This does not mean you must rescue everyone. It does not mean you must let others exploit your generosity. It does not mean success requires guilt. That is not Stoicism. Stoicism does not ask you to become careless with what you earned. It asks you to become just. Help where help is wise. Give where giving strengthens rather than weakens. Teach where teaching is useful. Protect your resources, but do not let protection become selfishness. Remember where you came from, but do not become trapped there. The young man learned this slowly. He learned that money could make him more useful. He could support his family. He could pay people fairly. He could refuse dirty deals because desperation no longer had him by the throat. He could open doors for others without becoming proud of the key. He could look at someone struggling and say, "I see you," without making them feel beneath him. That was wealth under virtue. Not wealth as a throne, wealth as a tool. This is the harsh truth. If becoming rich makes you cruel to the poor, then poverty never left you. It only moved from your wallet into your character. The young man refused to let that happen. He did not become rich to sneer at the people still fighting their way out. He became capable so he could stand with more strength, choose with more freedom, and serve with more power. Here is the lesson. If money makes you forget compassion, you have not risen. You have fallen upward. True wealth does not make you look down on the poor. It gives you the power to remember them with dignity. And once he understood that money was only a tool, not a throne, the final realization became clear. The Stoic victory was never wealth. It was freedom. The Stoic victory was freedom, not wealth. Wealth was never the final victory. Freedom was. That was the ninth realization. For years, the young man thought money would be the answer, not because he was greedy, but because poverty had made life feel narrow. Money meant breathing room. Money meant fewer emergencies. Money meant not having to explain every small decision. Money meant helping his family without breaking himself. Money meant walking through the world with a little more choice. And all of that mattered. But once money came, he saw something most people never see. A man can escape poverty and still remain enslaved. Enslaved to status. Enslaved to comparison. Enslaved to luxury. Enslaved to proving himself. Enslaved to the fear of losing what he gained. The chains had changed, but they were still chains. This is why Stoicism does not call wealth the highest good. The early Stoics taught that the only true good is virtue. Everything else is unstable. Money can come, money can go. Reputation can rise, reputation can fall. People can praise you today and forget you tomorrow. The body can be strong today and weak years later. The market can reward you now and punish you later. So if your peace depends on these things, your peace is rented, not owned. The Middle Stoics understood that a man should still work, build, trade, provide, and live responsibly in society. They did not teach laziness. They did not teach escape. They taught order. Use money. Do not worship it. Use status. Do not become addicted to it. Use success. Do not let success tell you who you are. And the later Stoics made this truth personal. Epictetus had little, but was inwardly free. Seneca had wealth, but warned that wealth becomes dangerous when the soul depends on it. Marcus Aurelius had power, but still reminded himself that power, fame, and praise were smoke in the wind. The young man began to understand. Freedom is not the same as having more. Freedom is needing less from what you have. Freedom is being able to enjoy money without kneeling to it. Freedom is being able to lose comfort without losing yourself. Freedom is being able to be respected without becoming hungry for respect. Freedom is being able to be ignored without feeling erased. One evening, he sat alone after a successful day. There was money in the account. There were people who now treated him differently. There were opportunities he once prayed for, but he noticed a new fear in himself. What if I lose it? What if they stop respecting me? What if I go back? What if everything I built disappears? And for a moment, he felt the old poverty return. Not in his wallet, in his chest. That was when he saw the truth. If money gives you peace, then money can take peace away. If applause gives you identity, silence can destroy you. If status gives you worth, Failure can make you feel worthless again. That is not freedom. That is dependence with better surroundings. So he returned to the Stoic law. What is mine? My judgment, my actions, my discipline, my honesty, my courage, my justice, my temperance, my character. What is not fully mine? The market, the praise, the economy, the opinions of others, the timing of success, the permanence of wealth, the certainty of tomorrow. This was not pessimism. It was liberation. Because once he stopped asking money to be his soul, money became clean again. It became a tool, a servant, a resource, a means of protection, creation, generosity, and responsibility, but not a master. That is apatheia. Not indifference as coldness, indifference as freedom from slavery. Apatheia means the world may touch you, but it does not own you. Poverty may hurt, but it does not define you. Wealth may help, but it does not crown you. Praise may feel good, but it does not become your oxygen. Loss may wound you, but it does not erase your worth. This is where Memento Mori enters quietly. One day, all of this will pass. The money, the titles, the accounts, the rooms where people admired you, the clothes, the possessions, the numbers, the applause, even the body you worked so hard to protect. Death will not ask how rich you became. Death will ask what kind of soul you carried while becoming rich. Did you become cruel? Did you become false? Did you become proud? Did you forget the people below you? Did you sell your word? Did you abandon your character for comfort? Did you gain the world and lose command of yourself? These questions are severe, but they save a man from worshipping temporary things. The young man realized that the true victory was not that he had more money than before. The true victory was that money no longer made him feel less human when he had little, or more human when he had much. He could build without worshipping. He could earn without begging for identity. He could enjoy without becoming soft. He could lose without becoming destroyed. He could give without performing goodness. He could stand in poor rooms and rich rooms with the same spine. That is wealth under reason. That is success under virtue. That is freedom. Here is the harsh truth. If you need money to feel worthy, you are still poor, even if you are rich. But if you can use money wisely, without letting it define your soul, then you have found something greater than wealth. You have found command. Here is the lesson. The Stoic victory was not wealth. It was freedom. Freedom from shame when poor. Freedom from arrogance when rich. Freedom from the crowd's judgment. Freedom from the wound that wanted revenge. Freedom from the hunger to prove. And once he understood that, the final law became clear. Become wealthy, but let virtue remain king. Become wealthy, but let virtue remain king. Become wealthy, but never let wealth become king. That is the final law. The young man had walked through poverty, shame, mockery, loneliness, silent work, ambition, money, temptation, compassion, and freedom. He had seen both sides. He had seen what lack does to people, and he had seen what abundance does to people. He had seen poor men become bitter because life gave them too little. He had seen rich men become hollow because life gave them too much without wisdom. And now he understood the truth. Money is never just money. Money magnifies the soul that holds it. If a man is generous, money gives his generosity hands. If a man is disciplined, money gives his discipline reach. If a man is insecure, money gives his insecurity a louder costume. If a man is cruel, money gives his cruelty more tools. This is why virtue must remain king. Not ambition, not wealth, not status, not revenge, not comfort. Virtue, wisdom to know what money is for, courage to earn without selling yourself, justice to use success without exploiting others, temperance to enjoy wealth without becoming its servant. The early Stoics taught that the good life is not built on possessions, but on the condition of the soul. The Middle Stoics taught that a person must live in society with duty, responsibility, and moral clarity. The later Stoics proved that even an emperor must guard his heart, and even a poor man can possess inner freedom. So the young man made peace with wealth. He no longer hated it. He no longer worshipped it. He no longer saw money as proof that he was finally worthy. He saw it as a tool, a serious tool, a dangerous tool, a useful tool, a tool that could build a home, protect a family, fund a mission, buy time, create opportunity, and serve people. But still, only a tool. One morning, after many years, he looked at his life and realized he had become what the boy inside him once prayed for. Not perfectly, not without scars, not without mistakes, but truly, he had more choice. He had more strength. He had more peace. He had enough to breathe. And in that moment, he felt a temptation, softer than greed. The temptation to relax his standard, to say, I have made it now, to loosen his discipline, to spend without thought, to speak with pride, to let comfort slowly do what poverty never could, break his command over himself. This is the danger few people warn you about. Poverty attacks loudly, comfort attacks quietly. Poverty makes you fight, comfort makes you forget. Poverty forces discipline, comfort invites decay. That is why the Stoic does not retire from virtue after success. He practices it more carefully, because the higher a man rises, the more dangerous his fall becomes. The young man knew this, so he kept a law in his chest. I will earn, but I will not worship. I will enjoy, but I will not obey appetite. I will rise, but I will not look down. I will own things, but I will not be owned by them. I will become wealthy, but virtue will remain king. This is the law every ambitious soul must carry. Because money will ask for your attention. Status will ask for your identity. Comfort will ask for your discipline. Pleasure will ask for your restraint. The crowd will ask you to perform success. Old wounds will ask you to prove yourself. And if virtue is not king, one of these will take the throne. That is how people lose themselves. Not always in scandal, not always in betrayal. Sometimes, slowly, a small lie, a proud word, a careless expense, a cruel judgment, a forgotten promise, a friend ignored, a family neglected, a soul that once wanted freedom now kneeling before more. The young man refused this slow death. He did not want to become another rich man with poor eyes. He did not want to become successful in public and ashamed in private. He did not want to win the marketplace and lose the inner court. So he kept returning to the same question. Can I respect the person I am becoming? Not, am I richer? Not, am I admired? Not, do they envy me? Can I respect the person I am becoming? That question became his guard. When money came, it guarded him. When praise came, it guarded him. When temptation came, it guarded him. When old shame tried to turn success into revenge, it guarded him. And slowly, wealth became clean in his hands. Not perfect, clean. He used it to build. He used it to protect. He used it to learn. He used it to serve. He used it to give himself space for deeper work. He used it to make life less cruel for those under his care. But he did not use it to purchase a false self. That is the difference. A weak man uses money to become someone else. A stoic man uses money to support the person he has chosen to be. This is the harsh truth. If you become rich but lose your honesty, you did not rise. If you become rich but lose your compassion, you did not rise. If you become rich but lose your discipline, you did not rise. If you become rich but need others to feel beneath you, you did not rise. You only climbed higher while becoming smaller. So become wealthy. Do not be ashamed of building. Do not be ashamed of wanting to give your family more. Do not be ashamed of wanting safety, freedom, beauty, opportunity, and strength. But never forget the order. Money must serve life. Life must serve virtue. Virtue must serve what is highest in the soul. Here is the lesson. Wealth is not the enemy, but wealth without virtue becomes another poverty. A poverty of character, a poverty of peace, a poverty of meaning, a poverty so deep that no amount of money can fill it. The young man understood this at last. He had not fought poverty only to become rich. He had fought poverty to become free. Free to build without shame. Free to earn without corruption. Free to enjoy without worshipping. Free to give without performing. Free to stand among the rich without envy. Free to stand among the poor without arrogance. That is the Stoic way. Get rich if you can. Build greatly if you can. Rise high if you can. But let virtue remain king. Because when death comes, it will not ask how much you owned. It will ask what owned you. And the man who can answer, "Nothing owned me but virtue," has already won. You are not wrong for wanting money. You are wrong only when money becomes the ruler of your soul. Poverty may test your endurance. Wealth may test your character. But neither one is allowed to define your worth. Build, earn, rise. Give your family peace. Give yourself freedom. Create something strong enough to survive the judgment of the world. But do not sell your honesty. Do not sell your compassion. Do not sell your discipline. Do not sell the quiet law inside your chest. Because money can buy comfort. It can buy attention. It can buy access. It can buy a softer life. But it cannot buy back a soul that was traded too cheaply. So let this be the final law. Use money. Do not worship it. Enjoy success. Do not kneel to it. Rise above poverty. Do not look down on the poor. Become wealthy if you can. But let virtue remain king. Because when your final day comes, life will not ask how much you owned. It will ask what owned you. And the free man will answer, "Nothing owned me. I built. I rose. I kept my soul."